Hello, and welcome to my PowerPoint on Dark Souls and narrative in video games. Today, I'd like to talk about the unique opportunity that video games provide for storytelling, one that creates a direct, personal experience that blurs the lines between player, audience, character, and author in ways that are difficult to achieve in other mediums. This power of video game narrative is rooted in something that we often overlook: interactivity. Professor Catherine Isbister, director of the Center for Games and Playable Media, highlights this in How to Play Video Games. The main difference between games and functionally fixed media like movies or novels is that players take an active role in the gaming experience. As Ernest Adams similarly argues, interactive narratives are defined by the contribution that the audience makes as they engage with the story. Games are experienced. One game which embodies this principle is Dark Souls, which I will use as a case study to explore the power of video game narrative. If you've played games for a while, you've almost certainly heard of Dark Souls, but let's make sure everyone's on the same page. Released in 2011 by From Software, Dark Souls is a dark fantasy RPG renowned for its punishing gameplay, interconnected level design, and cryptic storytelling. It sold millions of copies, spawned the Souls-like genre, and is hailed by many as one of the greatest games ever made. More importantly for our purposes, it uses its world building, mechanics, and player agency to draw players into its world to a degree that few games can rival. Let's start with world building. According to Met Studios, a school for games, visual effects, and animation, world building includes geography, culture, and environmental details that construct a game's setting. Dark Souls does the opposite of what most stories do. Its world building isn't in what it tells you, but in what it refuses to tell you. This cutscene plays at the beginning of the game, and it gives you the bare minimum to understand the setting of Lordran. The first flame appeared, powerful lords arose, they beat up some dragons, and now the first flame is fading. And that's pretty much all the direct exposition that you're given. The history of Lordran, its people, and its decline are left unexplained. If other stories give you a complete picture, Dark Souls throws a 1,000-piece puzzle on the floor, and only 900 of the pieces are there. You have to fill in those missing pieces yourself. Daniel Vella argues that this process of putting pieces together creates a powerful sense of mystery for the player, producing a world that can only be partially revealed through interpretation. Environmental storytelling is one of the tools that Dark Souls relies on the most. On the left is Blighttown, a decaying settlement of diseased undead built over a toxic swamp, reached by crawling downwards through the Undead Burg's sewers. Clara Vanendez-Vara describes how space can produce a story that is not told, but inferred, and that is precisely what is happening here. Here, we can clearly see that in Lordran, the lower you are physically, the lower you are socially. The well-off live at the literal top of the world, while the undesirables are pushed down as far as possible, drowning in the refuse of those above. Eventually, you'll arrive at the peak of Lordran, Anor Londo. It is beautiful, pristine, and bright, but also oddly empty. Is this a technical limitation or an intentional narrative choice? Dark Souls invites these questions. The game forces you to play an amateur archaeologist, assembling meaning by noticing and connecting small details as you explore. The puzzle continues in item descriptions and dialogue. The Ring of the Sun's Firstborn tells us that Gwyn's eldest child was a war god, erased from history, but it gives us no clues as to why. And if we listen to this dialogue from Solera Vestora,
"We are amidst strange beings in a strange land. The flow of time itself is convoluted, with heroes centuries old phasing in and out. The very fabric wavers, and relations shift and obscure."
we learn that time is strange in Lordran, but it's not really clarified as to how. Rather than illuminating the world, these fragments invite questions. Even 14 years after Dark Souls was released, fans still debate the fate of Gwyn's Firstborn and how time functions. This interpretive richness led to fans dedicating years to dissecting the game's lore, with creators like VaatiVidya producing hour-long video essays, and projects like Abyssal Archive interpreting and cataloging Lorjan's mythology. The most interesting thing about the puzzle pieces Dark Souls gives us are the new gaps they introduce in our understanding of the narrative, and the new interpretations we have to come up with to explain those new puzzle pieces. Historically, narrative and gameplay were viewed as competing forces in game studies. Kyle Eveleth instead proposes that they can enhance each other, with player actions strengthening the narrative, not detracting from it. Dark Souls is proof of this. My favorite example is the bonfire. Bonfires act as checkpoints, places to level up, and safe zones. Standard fare for most games. What isn't standard is Dark Souls' choice to make respawning a canonical part of the world. This practice was discussed by Fernandez Vara, where she noted the ability of a narrative to not only give context to mechanics, but engage players. Death doesn't rewind time. You play as an undead who will die and return forever. In Lorjan, bonfires are refuges for undead, offering a brief respite from the hostile world and soothing the insanity caused by undeath. Because bonfires are so spread out, the player feels that same tension their character would feel. As you delve deeper into a new area, you accumulate souls, which are lost upon death, and anxiety builds as your healing items dwindle. One mistake means losing huge chunks of progress. I want you to notice this run that I'm showing you. This is not the farthest distance between bonfires in the game, and it also is not the most difficult, but I still died repeatedly just trying to get this recording, despite the fact that I had the benefit of prior knowledge. And it takes almost 4 minutes to make this journey, even though I've already explored this area before. So, whenever you finally find the next bonfire, relief feels real. You're finally finding that one place in the game where you aren't in danger and you aren't at risk of losing anything. As Ilger notes, the repeated deaths that players experience invite them to embody the themes of despair and persistence central to Dark Souls' world. Dominguez and others further show that emotional challenges like this actually heighten immersion. Dark Souls implicitly transforms this one simple mechanic into a powerful narrative tool. This is storytelling not through overt text or cutscenes, but through gameplay. This leads to the final piece, player agency. Gallon identified agency as a defining characteristic that sets video games apart from other media. Dark Souls was designed around this principle. Creative director Hidetaka Miyazaki explained in an interview, "I don't want to tell the story. I prefer the players to unravel it by using their imagination and our hints." The game is intentionally incomplete. As Fernandez Vara points out, a game's narrative is only completed when it is performed by the player. The order in which you explore Lorjan changes your understanding of the story. Someone who enters the catacombs early on will have a very different mental image than someone who goes there at the end. Rao reiterates that narrative interpretation will shift uniquely with each playthrough based on player decisions. Major narrative beats also are changed by your actions. Attacking Guinevere in Anor Londo will plunge the city into eternal night, fundamentally changing the world's tone.
Thou that tarnisheth the godmother's image, I am Gwyndolin, and thy transgression shall not go unpunished. Thou shalt perish in the twilight of Anor Londo.
The player doesn't just watch the story of Dark Souls, they create it. When you put it all together, world building by omission, mechanics that produce emotional meaning, and your agency to interpret and shape the story, Dark Souls becomes more than a game. It becomes a living story. When you play Dark Souls, you act as the audience, uncovering Lordran's history. You act as a character, sharing in the fear and the struggles of the undead that you play as, and you act as a co-author, filling in gaps, making decisions, and transforming the world through your actions. That is why Dark Souls' narrative has persisted for 14 years and why it remains a powerful reminder of what video game narratives can achieve. This has been my PowerPoint on Dark Souls and video game narrative, and I hope that you enjoyed. I'm going to go over the references slides real quick just so you can see them and check on them if you're interested. Take up quite a bit of space in the proper APA format, so they're split over like 4 slides. Thank you for watching.